Thanks, you guys. Good work.
Kristen, are we good to start?
Absolutely, Jill. Whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for From Seed to Success, HR Strategies for Cannabis Businesses. My name is Jill Osborn. I am a consultant at KMA. I have a long history of the cannabis industry. I've been working in TA and HR and cannabis since 2015. I came to the industry. My daughter has a severe form of epilepsy, and I was recruited into the industry after advocating for pediatric access in my home state of Massachusetts. So it's been a very mission-driven purpose for me getting into the industry, and it's been very rewarding to kind of see the growth and navigate the challenges through it. So I'm excited to share some of the knowledge that I've gained with you today, and welcome. Let's get started. First, we have to offer our disclaimer. This presentation has been provided for informational purposes only. It's not intended and should not be construed as legal advice. Please consult your attorneys in connection with any fact-specific situation under federal, state, or local laws that may impose legal or financial obligations on you and your company or organization. We also would like to make sure that you're aware that this webinar is being recorded. Any questions that you have can be put in the chat or the Q&A, whichever you're most comfortable with, and we will answer it if I see it right away, or we'll get to all questions at the end as well. Thanks so much for joining us. So our agenda today, some of the things that we're going to be talking about: cannabis industry overview, outsourced HR and recruiting strategies, and why that's a good solution for small cannabis businesses, hiring and retention challenges and strategies, and some of the industry-specific pain points and considerations. Our first section is just cannabis industry overview, a little bit about what makes this industry different than some of the other CPG or competitive industries. The cannabis industry, despite the current challenges and volatility of the industry as it matures in some of these Northeastern markets, is still the fastest growing industry, doubling in size in the last 4 years. Industry revenue is anticipated to demonstrate an annual growth of 2.39%, leading to a market volume of over $59 billion by 2029. In global comparison, the US is projected to generate the highest revenue in 2025 of $45.35 billion. And yet, only 44% of cannabis companies have internal HR, and even fewer have internal talent acquisition or recruiting. How can outsourced HR and recruiting strategies help? Outsourced recruiting can help not just with job postings, but we offer effective screening of candidates, developing relevant interview questions, upskilling your hiring managers with interview training that goes beyond just the law and empowers them to ask behavioral-based interview questions. It's so important not just that we're making objective hiring decisions based on quality interview questions that get the answers that we really want to know. It's important that we're teaching hiring managers how to make objective hiring decisions and not fall into the trap of what I call validating their yes. Sometimes you sit down with somebody and you instantly like them. So you think, oh, I want to hire this person. That's what we call validating your yes. So that initial, just like I like them, so I'm going to hire them. And it's really about diving into why will this person be a good teammate? What value add will they be to your team and to your company? And do you have the right career path for this person? And then developing the candidate experience that moves from the initial application all the way through the onboarding process. In terms of HR, HR strategies that can help, that can be outsourced to developing or reviewing company documents, such as offer letters, handbooks, policies, evaluating your ATS and HRIS software solutions, making sure you're not just using Excel, that you have an active solution, and ensuring that you're utilizing them to your maximum efficiency. Sometimes when you're implementing those programs, it can be so overwhelming that you're not absorbing all of the tools and efficiencies that it can provide for you. We can audit payroll practices to ensure compliance, avoid potential class action lawsuits and fines, review time tracking practices, and assist with exempt versus non-exempt statuses, and helping to ensure that you're compliant with those, assisting with employee issues to minimize risk and liability to the company. We can also create and deploy job-specific training programs. We can initiate career paths, org charts, development plans. There's so many opportunities for HR to come in to a company that doesn't necessarily have internal or doesn't have enough internal HR support to be able to supplement that through an outsourced solution. Again, developing and delivering employee review practices. There are so many companies that don't have strong employee reviews in place. Also, market compensation studies to ensure that companies stay competitive as industry and talent matures. There was a time when we didn't have experienced talent, and so everybody was kind of coming in at the same base rate. That's not the case anymore. And so now we have to make sure that we're making accommodations for that experience. We sometimes say that we measure cannabis industry experience in dog years. Employee engagement initiatives, making sure your team stays cohesive and connected and is able to enjoy their workplace and make them a more productive employee. That's something that we can certainly help facilitate as well. Developing and conducting employee surveys to assess what's important in the workforce. It's really important to conduct these surveys and make sure you're reaching out to your employees so that they feel heard and find what's really important to them when they're coming to work. Creating and deploying job-specific training programs and initiating career paths and org charts and development plans. Hiring and retention challenges and strategies. Cannabis has historically high turnover. Why? There are no market assessments for compensation to ensure that you're keeping up with competitive offerings in other relevant industries. There's no employee leveling practices to keep up with cost of living increases and inflation. A lot of times companies offer limited benefits because limited benefits are available to them. Inadequate or non-existent performance reviews and inadequate or non-existent training plans. A lot of times we take somebody who maybe had a year of experience, maybe didn't have any experience, and we're kind of expecting them to just come in and sink or swim. And it's not setting the candidate or the new employee up for success or a developing employee up for success. And the number one reason, it's primarily the novelty wears off. People come into the industry thinking that it's going to be a party, and it ends up actually after a period of time becoming a job. And sometimes in the case of like a production position, a redundant job. And so that excitement in the very beginning where they're like, yes, I'm going to work with cannabis, it wears off and it becomes again another job that they're expected to be at every day. So how do we impact these turnover rates and make it a more positive experience? High turnover means constant hiring, but the industry is still attracting a high volume of candidates. Anytime we have cannabis in our job ad, we see an increased level of activity and applicants. So there's still, again, that novelty to working in cannabis that appeals to so many people. It is important to remember that working in the cannabis industry is still an act of civil disobedience. It's still federally illegal. And the industry itself has developed a reputation for being less professional than its highly regulated counterparts. I've heard people, even from the alcohol industry, say things like, oh, you're doing bong hits in your boardroom. And so there's that stigma that because it's cannabis, there's a lack of professionalism. And we really need to stop the turnover. Stopping turnover means that it's going to cost you less for your hiring and training. You want to protect the investment of the employee that you chose to bring on board. High turnover, a lot of times, is from bad hiring decisions. So we have to really look at our process and start there. Who is making the hiring decisions? Is it the department manager? Who's involved in the interview process? What does your interview plan look like? These are all important things that are touch points on who makes the decision about a candidate becoming an employee. And how was the person making the hiring decision trained? What kind of training did your company offer them? What kind of background did they come in with? And what's your hiring process? Are you moving too fast? Are you making desperate decisions because you are so in need of employees, because you got behind or you lost people too fast? Are you moving too slow and losing really quality candidates? Outsourced recruiting is a partner that can train hiring managers to make more effective hiring decisions. So outsourced recruiting isn't always just posting the ad and screening the candidates. It can be training for the hiring managers. And again, I think, as I talked about earlier, really important to go beyond just what's legal to ask and dive into what's important to know and how do we ask the questions that really get that information. And it's not an easy thing to do if you're in a 15-minute interview. And so interviewing is a skill that has to be developed. And people that are great managers aren't necessarily great interviewers unless you train them to be so. So some of my key interviewing tips for cannabis candidates, outside of their relevant experience, whether that's in industry or out of industry, what makes a candidate stand out? So when I'm screening a resume or I'm sitting in front of a candidate and I'm asking questions, what makes me excited to bring them to a client? My top tip: in the early days of the industry, everybody said, if you're going to work in cannabis, you have to be passionate about cannabis. And I like the saying, passion flares and fades. I try to hire for purpose. Mission driven employees are the ones who find the work rewarding, even when the novelty wears off. They aren't coming to the industry because they think it's going to be fun, because they think it's going to be a party, because there are going to be smoke sessions on Wednesday nights at the the bar next door, whatever. But I think that there's this perception that coming into the workplace is not work if it's in cannabis. And so if you find those mission driven employees, they understand the work, and then they're able to find reward even when that novelty wears off. In the early days of the industry, when I first started, there were no candidates with experience because the industry hadn't existed yet. So I had to learn, and all the early recruiters had to learn how to hire based on relevant skills and experience. So we look at relevant industries that share some of the same skills. And now that we have the luxury of experienced candidates, we have kind of lost sight of the importance of that. And so it's really easy to get seduced by the fact that this person's worked in cannabis for 5 years. They're going to be great. They're going to be able to come in and jump in and do the job with minimal training. And that's not necessarily the case. Maybe they've been in the industry for 5 years, but you don't know what their training looked like in their previous positions. So were they trained appropriately? Were they trained wrong? And so don't be swayed by industry experience, and don't discount those soft skills. Soft skills really matter. You can train skills, workplace skills, but you can't change someone's personality. Some of the soft skills to look for: my very first cannabis talent acquisition position, we came up with humble, happy, hardworking. There is no place for ego in this industry. If I'm on a cultivation call and the person tells me they grow the dankest weed, they're automatically a no for me, because nobody in this industry is an expert. There is no such thing on cannabis yet. And so what I am looking for is someone who is humble, who knows that they have a lot to learn, because we all have a lot to learn about this plant, about this industry. Even when we think that the industry is settled, it starts to change. I mean, we're seeing so much volatility and changes as the industry matures in each state. We can look at previous states to kind of see what that looks like and what the path is going to be, but you can't actually predict what the timeline is going to look like or what it's going to be for your specific state, because each state has such individual regulations that affect the overall industry and growth so much. I'm always looking for active listening skills. Can this person articulate? Have they demonstrated an ability to be agile? I mean, how many times in cannabis have we gotten 90% of the way through a product or project and had one regulation change and had to completely start over? So that ability to be flexible in cannabis, and we call it sway like a palm tree, and not be broken by the fact that you have to start over, is very important. We are always looking for people who are passionate about small businesses, startup culture, likes to wear many hats, the ability, and not even ability, just the desire to want to collaborate cross-departmentally is so important in cannabis, because it always is a startup culture. Even in some of the more established companies and markets, we're still a very immature industry. And so everybody's kind of taking on multiple areas and collaborating across departments. We're looking for a balance of professionalism as we transition from a movement to an industry. The cannabis industry was built on a movement. And so it is really important that as we are moving into this professional industry, we honor the movement that it evolved from. And so we are looking for a balance of that commitment to cannabis, that commitment to the industry, and the professionalism that it takes to move to transition this movement into a true professional legal industry. Cannabis requires quality employees to break the stigma of both the plant and the industry. It's funny, I had somebody email me this morning about a comment that I had made on LinkedIn. Somebody had shared that they were trying to get out of the cannabis industry and they were experiencing some prejudice because of their cannabis experience. And so it's really important that we are maintaining that professional level of just presence, so that other industries are able to see that we are a legally operating industry now. It is, we have quality employees, we're having quality training, and being able to break that stigma. And arguably the most important soft skill to look for in cannabis, perpetual curiosity. Again, as I started with in the humble, happy, and hardworking, there is so much to learn. There will always be things to learn. People that come into cannabis have to be always willing to learn and change, and really be seeking new knowledge and skills all the time as it's developing, as research opportunities become available, as job opportunities grow, as cannabis businesses expand. Some businesses start as strictly retail and then expand into fully vertically integrated companies, which means that they carry their own plants from cultivation through extraction to kitchen to their retail stores. And so making sure that people are curious and have a strong desire to keep learning, and not people who think that they know everything already. And quality TA and HR assistants can really help dig into finding these soft skills. We don't always think about how to ask questions about soft skills in interviews. And so that's an important thing that we can work together to learn. Before we go to section 4, I just want to say, because of the cannabis movement and developing into an industry, it's really important that we acknowledge that even corporate cannabis companies will never have the structure of corporate America. Cannabis began as that counterculture movement, and it demands that the industry honor that. And people are passionate about maintaining the history of the cannabis movement. And so finding the balance is one of the most important things that as employees we do. So it's making sure that we're advocating for the plant and the industry, and that those goals are aligning. Cannabis deserves quality employees as part of breaking that stigma. So moving forward, we can talk about some industry-specific pain points and considerations. One of the most important industry-specific pain points is attendance. Stoner time is not just a joke. The industry suffers from severe attendance issues. How do we solve for that? One of the easiest ways is accurate timekeeping with biometrics, fingerprints, facial recognition, requiring employees to clock in and clock out with those biometrics in place is going to help you with accurate timekeeping. Practicing progressive discipline for employees with chronic attendance issues, developing policies or point systems, and making expectations clear. I think sometimes, again, as people come into the industry and think it's just going to be this relaxed, fun place to be, they don't necessarily think of it as having the same structured requirements that other jobs do. And so making sure that we are holding employees accountable for that is part of maintaining the professionalism of the industry and addressing this industry pain point. Scheduling shifts and breaks in compliance with local and state laws. How many times are employees just taking their break without it being scheduled? And if you're in, say, a production room, how does that affect the flow of the production line? And making sure that we're scheduling those breaks and shifts in compliance with laws, but also to the needs of the business. So being able to balance those is very important. And maintaining that employees must be paid for all hours worked and should clock in and out for all shifts and unpaid meal breaks. 92% of companies have time theft that adds 5% to their payroll costs each year, according to industry accountants. And we know that because of 280E, payroll expenses are not tax deductible the way that they are in traditional industries, which means that 5% cost is a huge burden on the company to carry. And just having accurate timekeeping policies and programs in place and being able to hold employees accountable is going to be huge in protecting those costs to the company. Another industry pain point that everyone will talk about is compliance. We have constantly changing regulations. They vary from state to state. Different companies have different perspectives and different cultures. Some companies promote a culture of compliance and they want to ensure over compliance. They want to make sure that they're always doing the right thing. And some companies are a little more lackadaisical about it. They consider fines a cost of doing business in this industry, and they're okay with assuming a fine if it means that what they wanted to do gets done. Outside of industry compliance, though, and industry regulations, there are labor laws and practices that must be adhered to that also vary state by state. Many companies, small companies particularly, do not understand their obligations under ADA and FMLA. How many employees do you need to have to practice this? There are specific qualifications for them. ADA is 15 employees, FMLA is 50, but there's a radius. So even if you have multiple locations, if those locations are within a specific radius and there's 50 employees across the multiple locations, you could still be obligated to offer FMLA. And so it's really important that you have somebody who understands these programs to be able to help you navigate them and, again, mitigate that risk to your company. Also, mandatory trainings, sexual harassment trainings. There are certain trainings that are sometimes required, or licensing requirements. Unconscious bias training can be can be a licensing requirement, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Those kinds of things are also things that outsourced HR and recruiting can help with. Another industry pain point is retention. So you think you created a quality interview and hiring practice, and yet 30% of employees leave the industry within 90 days. Why? Employee onboarding. Set your employee up for success. While the process is different in each state, it is the cannabis industry onboarding, not just into your payroll system, not just into your company, but even the pre-onboarding, what comes after the offer letter is accepted, is more arduous than competitive industries. There are often very thorough background checks. There's a badging process in pretty much every state, or we call it agent licensing in some states, that takes time. We need to communicate these average timelines for the employees up front. So I tell people in our first interview, it's about a 3-week process from offer letter to start date, because it's, we're budgeting about 7 to 10 days for background check and another 7 days or so for that badging process. So making sure we're communicating those timelines and you're not losing a candidate halfway through that onboarding process because they didn't realize it was going to take so long for them to start a job and they really needed something this week. So setting those expectations are really important. When we talked about the novelty wearing off, new employees find that the industry or the role is just not what they expected. What do you know? We aren't taking bong hits in the break room at lunchtime. They thought it would be less of a job and more of a party. So making sure that in addition to the offer letter, we're providing a job description, making those job descriptions concise and easy to read, not getting caught up as much in the superfluous language of making sure we cover all of our bases, but making sure that a job description is something that an employee can look at and know what their job is going to be like. So that we're setting clear expectations for them and ensure that they're signing off on it during their onboarding process so they understand the responsibility of the role. Training. Very few cannabis companies have internal training teams. Who develops your training? Who delivers your training? Online responsible vendor training, sometimes referred to as RVT. Do you think that covers it? Do you throw employees into a cultivation room and say, pluck these leaves? Do you have a designated trainer in each department and a training outline that sets a tone for accountability and invests in the talent that you've brought on board? And providing growth. People look at this industry as this fast growing industry, and we need to make sure that the career paths are growing, the opportunities for the employees are growing at the same rate as the company and the industry. Otherwise, they're going to get burnt out or tired of it or feel that they have no place to move. And a lot of times that's how you lose an employee. So there aren't enough management positions for everyone in a department to filter into management, nor is that always the most natural step for somebody. Just because somebody's good at their job doesn't mean they're going to be good at managing. They're entirely different skill sets. And so what do we do? How do we develop career paths, or how do we develop growth opportunities, or even training and learning opportunities for our employees? So things like building out an LMS training program can be a heavy investment, but have great ROI. So these can be online, or these can be trainings that you offer in person. But developing a training module that acts as criteria for promotion that helps support employee development also allows employees to feel a sense of growth and learning and accomplishment even before there are promotions available to them. Alternately, also hypergrowth, sometimes periods of hypergrowth, companies turn to internal promotions as the easiest path or the path of least resistance, but it's not always the most effective path. Sometimes it's about investing in a little bit more time to get somebody new on board. And it's important to step back and assess long-term, is an internal promotion, or is the external hiring process the best solution for both the individual that you're considering promoting and the company? I always advise not to get caught up in band-aids that you think are just an easy, quick fix, because they just lead to a delay of finding your better solution. Another one of the industry pain points is benefits. Many companies struggle to offer even the most basic benefits. Industry offerings and banking have improved since the early days in Colorado, when employees were getting cash in an envelope at the end of the week because you couldn't have a bank account, but they still lag behind their competitors in competitive industries. ACA compliance dictates that 50 full-time equivalent employees influence the benefits that you offer, which means that you have to take into consideration hours that part-time employees work as well, because they count toward that total. There are medical, dental, vision, short-term, long-term disability, and retirement options available. But there are still some health insurance, 401k providers. There are still some supplemental insurance policies, such as supplemental PFML, which are withholding services from cannabis companies. So cannabis companies are more limited in the companies that they can work with to provide benefits, which means that the benefits packages aren't always as robust as competitive industries. Compensation is really important, and it's one of those areas where cannabis has really fallen behind. It's so important to do market assessments to ensure that you're offering competitive compensation. Again, because we do have the luxury of having experienced candidates at this point, making sure that we are compensating them in a way that accounts for their experience is going to be really important. If you are hiring now at the same rate that you were hiring in 2019, you are not going to attract top talent. And reevaluating employee leveling, market rate increases, eliminating that so-called loyalty tax for employees that stay, can help you retain the talent that you've invested in hiring and training. Another important pain point to note in the industry is data security. With all of the other security regulations, employee data security can often be overlooked. I have seen companies that are using Excel spreadsheets or hard files still for employee files. And it's important with ATS and HRIS and payroll software solutions. The options, again, because of the banking challenges, are more limited in the cannabis industry. Initially, there were only like one or two mediocre options, but there are now several options available. And it's been really wonderful to see the progression of these softwares being available to the industry. But a knowledgeable consultant can assist or lead you through that selection and implementation process. A lot of times, if you're stuck in a solution that's not really working for you, you feel like it's more of a headache to change your payroll system or your HRIS system than it is to just deal with what you've got. But because there are so many more options now than there initially were, it's a really important thing to consider, because it can really help with your efficiencies and your employee experience. The value of handbooks. This one cannot be understated. I have walked into companies that have one-page employee handbooks, and this is not just a huge liability risk for your company, but it is a total disservice to your employees. Handbooks are where we offer employees all of the information that they need to be a constructive employee within your company. And it's also a place where we can list policies and be able to hold employees accountable. So handbooks should include information on timekeeping, benefits, PTO and sick time. How are they accrued? Making sure that we're auditing that to make sure it's compliant with state laws. Premium pay holidays, making sure that if you're in, say, a manufacturing environment or a retail environment, that you're offering the right pay on certain holidays if you're open. We have seen class action lawsuits because of a lack of premium pay, because of inadequate payroll practices. So it's really important to make sure that we are auditing those practices and then making sure that we are relaying them and communicating them and setting those expectations appropriately starting in our handbook. Dress codes are important, company policies relating to use of personal devices. We do, and people have phones with them all of the time. How are they accessing company information, company SOPs, all of, company intelligence, and making sure that we're setting standards and policies around that. Again, attendance, because it is such a pain point in the industry, making sure that we're clearly communicating that policy, the accountability practices, and moving forward with AI being such a big thing, making sure that we're adding AI policies to our handbook. How will we allow employees to use AI? Will we allow AI to write policies or SOPs? And making sure that we're setting policies around that and getting ahead of it before it's too late. And state required addendums relating to family leave, PFML, all of those kind of applicable state specific policies and laws. Before we move into unionization, I just want to say, like, industry specific policies in your handbook should not be overlooked. Compliance with annual background checks, training, badging renewals. Those things can kind of get lost in the shuffle when you're juggling so many balls. So making sure that you have a practice in place to track those. Sometimes it can be done in your HRIS system. You're able to input dates so that employees get reminders to renew those things. And one of the most important things that comes up so regularly in cannabis HR that absolutely must be covered in handbooks, in early training, is on-site consumption. What is your company policy? What are your state regulations? What is your disciplinary action? Many times state regulations do cover this, and so your policy is just a reiteration of that. But it's important to make sure that it's communicated strongly from the initial training. And then moving forward on unionization in cannabis, this is such a hot topic. Almost every other industry has had a decline in unionization, and yet in cannabis, we have seen an increase in unionization attempts, and they've really taken hold. There's ensuring that you don't violate workers' rights if employees do organize is imperative to your business. It is a huge risk and liability to handle a unionization attempt wrongly. So we would always advise that you seek outside HR guidance, legal guidance where appropriate. But employees are looking at unions to help them solve some of the things that we could solve in conversation or with employee surveys, and understanding what's important to employees, things like the benefits we are offering. What are we missing that employees really want? And it goes back to those employee surveys and training, and making sure that we are setting them up for success, that we are providing adequate training, that we're providing adequate equipment, lack of performance reviews. So employees feel like they never got a fair review, they never got a raise. And so they're looking at unions as their advocate to put these things in place, when a partnership with an outsourced HR solution could help you get ahead of those things. And often there's a disconnect between executives and hourly employees that make employees feel the need to organize. And there is one easy step that I advise any company to take, and that's monthly town hall meetings. They can be structured, they can be relaxed, they can be a Zoom call, they can be a conference call. Set them in place now, because once employees start to organize, you can't implement them, but if you have them in place already, you can continue them. A monthly town hall gives employees a place to offer pain points, offer feedback, collaborate. These are my pain points. How can we work together? And it just makes them feel heard. And more often than not, unionization is coming about because employees don't feel heard and they feel that they need to organize and in order to collectively have a voice because you didn't hear the one or two voices in the interim. And so having those monthly town hall meetings, making employees feel heard, and not just making them feel heard, but actually hearing them is going to be a huge step in avoiding unionization if that is your goal. Also to note that there are a lot of states that have come online that require labor peace agreements with specific unions so that so that your rights are different if employees do decide to organize. Again, that's why it's so important to seek outside guidance and make sure that everything's being handled appropriately. But these town hall meetings are, again, a forum for employees to be heard, and they give you an opportunity to address frequent issues or questions before employees feel the need to unionize. So I'm going to be wrapping up just in a minute, so we'll be taking any questions at the end. But I do just want to note that cannabis companies increasingly need HR and recruiting expertise in order to manage their growth. We go through hyper growth periods, and they're really hard and tricky and challenging to navigate. And having somebody kind of in your corner to take some of these things off your plate that are an expert in that field will really help. And KMA can offer these outsourced solutions to support you as you recruit, manage, retain your talent so that you can focus on what matters most, growing your business. With the industry growth and the market maturation, cannabis companies are always still in startup mode, and it can be difficult or impossible to absorb the overhead cost of internal HR or TA, which is why an outsourced solution is somebody that's just there when you need them. It provides the support you need within your budget, and understanding that having an understanding of the industry and also compliance and labor laws that can assist you in, again, mitigating that risk to your company. That is everything that I have prepared for today. Is there anything that anyone would like to ask, share? I believe the chat and the Q&A are open, and Kristen is monitoring those. Kristen, any questions?
I'm not seeing any pop up, Jill.
Excellent. Well, in that case, you are always welcome to reach out to me. I'm JOSBORN at KMAHR.com. If you have any follow-up questions, feedback, anything that you'd like to share or ask, I am available. And thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.